Hello and welcome to lecture 23, where I will be showing you how to set up different materials for car paints. The most basic one would be a regular diffuse car paint, which is just sometimes a basic color such as red, white, blue, and then with a clear coat on top. This is the generic car paint which you would get when you buy the basic car setup. After that, you will get a bit more expensive car paint options like metallic car paints. Then you get another one which has metallic flakes in it. And I think the most expensive ones are like different colors which are changing based on the angle, which is called pearlescent color. And I'll be going through the different steps to show you how to set up all those different kinds of car paint. And we will start with the most basic one, and we will progress slowly to the more advanced shaders and advanced car paints until we have something very interesting and physical looking. So as you can see on the left is my teapot render, which I got from the online community, and it is a little tank inspired by Pixar's teapot, and you definitely have the option to assign a car paint shader on the body of that. So what I did previously, I just assigned some metal shaders, nothing too fancy, and on the body itself is currently just a standard surface shader with a basic gray response. Arnold has a dedicated car paint shader, and we will be only using this to create car paint because you can still do it with a surface shader, but they have a dedicated physical car paint shader which we will be using. It's called AI car paint, and we'll be just connecting the out color to my shading engine to get that assigned. So if I remove this, you can see already that the car paint has a preset and it's a red car. So by just rendering the default parameters, you get a pretty decent looking red car paint right out of the box. So I just want to focus on the top part just to get a faster response of the shaders. So I'm just doing a render region on the top part of the car paint. And now we can easily just change the color. Let's say we want to have a green car. We just change the color and we get a green car. So essentially what we want to do is make an interesting metallic car paint. So let's say we find a reference which we want to work on and explore to get it exactly matching. So I think we should try to get something similar into this color space. So something orange red with these nice yellow looking flakes. So what I'm trying to do now is create a base color of red, and then we introduce the metallic, and then we introduce the flakes as well. So the basic thing would be to first change our base color, which is our diffuse component, to something in a red or orange hue. So let's just change our color wheel to something around that. I think something like this for the diffuse component should be very interesting. So obviously we need to work with the specularity. So the base, we can for now just close this tab and head over to the specularity. And let's just change the color also to this orange. And then we should also change the IOR to maybe a value higher than 5. Let's just go maybe with 8. And then you can already see we get this nice metallic looking paint job. And let's play around with the roughness just to increase this maybe to 2.5, 0.25. And now just by doing this, we already get this a very similar effect to this. You get this nice color sheen on the paint. I think we should play it up a bit more. So maybe let's just go to 0.35 just to broaden this area a bit more. And already now we can see that this is a very interesting looking effect. Can see how this works. Let's check the body a bit more here, and this looks really cool just by changing the specularity. It's a really smooth shader right now, and at the default value there is a coat enabled. So without the coat, this is what the base or the metal layer would look like, and this you can kind of mimic this effect also using a standard surface shader. So this is currently the basic which we are using, and what we can do now is we can either make it more metallic by introducing a higher IOR, maybe 15, and you can see that the metal parts get a bit more shiny. This is no preference, up to the artist or up to you if you would like to have a stronger reflective color or a less reflective color. And keep in mind that there's also some of the transmission of the base coming through. So if I would change this to be more blue, you can see that it is actually changing because there is still some base paint showing through. And this is normal. This is how car paint works. It has different levels, and the rays actually go through to change the color underneath as well. So but I like something around 8, which is not that intense. So let's just keep the IOR low. And now what we can do is flip-flop color. And what it essentially does is it's assigning a color based on the angle of the camera. So we should get a different color on the front-facing surfaces compared to the edge. So to set this up, what we need to do is create a ramp with a texture, and then also an AI facing ratio node where we connect the out value to the V coordinate of the ramp. Like so. Any other package like Katana or Cinema, they have a ramp where you can plug in your UV coordinates. And if I connect the out color to my flip-flop color, we should see something in a bit. So first of all, to get this working, I need to have a white base color. And now you can see there is definitely a fall off happening. You can see the edge has a color and it's fading off. So in my ramp, what we want to do is we just choose the same color, this orange, and we put the orange here as well. So now we should have the same effect as we had before. Same color, I mean. The only benefit now is we can change the 0-degree angle or the 90-degree angle color. So if I change the 90-degree angle color, you can see that my edges get really red and the center is still orange. And this is the effect which I wanted to go for. So we have a kind of like a color changing paint based on the angle that we look at. And this can look very interesting at some point. I think the red is a bit too saturated, and so is the orange as well. So I just like to play around with the orange a bit, make it maybe a bit darker and desaturate this. Because we will also be introducing the flakes pretty soon. Okay, that looks interesting. So now let's bring back the code to 1. And now we get the nice reflection back. And obviously this washes out the image a bit, so we can actually bring back some of the orange again, which we had previously. Yeah, I think this was actually good how it was with this default saturation. All right, so the next thing what I would like to introduce is we can play with these flakes. So this introduces actually some physical metal flakes into the shader. So if I just increase the density to maybe 0.4, you can see that we get white reflections everywhere. White little flakes. And I think the scale is a bit too small. So let's just try 0.01 instead, which is also still small. So let's just go 0.1. And now you can see we have a bit bigger amount of flakes. It might be now a bit too big, but it's something just that you can visualize, that you can see them in the render. So what we can do now is we can colorize them. So let's just assign a basic color of maybe a red. And now we can see something very nice looking. You can see that we get these really red hot reflections everywhere. If I bring back the code to 0, you can see what we get. Obviously, I think the flakes are now a bit too large. So let's just maybe reduce the scale by 0 to 0.25. So I have a smaller scale amount. And now we can still see the red flakes. We should maybe make them a bit more white. Bit more saturation. Yeah, maybe we'll just leave it at the default. So this would be something to play around with. You can also change the randomize, which is how strong the flakes are facing the light or not. So the more you go to 0, the less you can register them. And the higher you make the normal randomize, the stronger they reflect light back. And then we can also play around with the roughness. If it's too rough, we don't see them as much. So a lower roughness would make them more shiny. You can see that we see them a bit better now. And let's see what else we can do. I think the scale is maybe a bit too small. Maybe we go back to 0.5. So yeah, this is now would be a typical metal car paint with red flakes. You can also use a flip-flop color the same way as we used before. So currently the flip-flop is changing the color based on the angle of the camera. So what we can actually do is let's just connect the ramp to a color correct node and connect the color from the ramp into the color correction, and then the out color goes into the flip-flop of the flakes. And let's just change the flake base color back to white. So now we have the same color which is driving the car paint base, the same colors driving the flake colors. And this gives us a very uniform car paint. So there are lots of different sliders in the shader to get the look you want. It's very sensitive to get the right color. So play around and always play around with smaller increments. So now I'm just hue shifting the ramp. And if I do isolate selected, you can see what color we get. Maybe not as much, maybe something more orange. This was the default we had. So if I hue shift it by 0.02, we get a more orange color. We can play up the saturation a bit or reduce it. So let's just leave it at the default and see what we get now. So now we have more brighter flakes. And I think this looks actually pretty cool. So let's introduce our code back to 1. And this is now very interesting looking. So let's just render and see what we get with these settings. Alright, now you can actually see that after the render finish, we get pretty nice results actually. You can see that there's a nice flakiness going on where the highlights are, and it's a nice gradual fall off. And especially on flat surfaces, you can see how great this effect works. So this would be a typical metal flake shader. You can play around with the scale, the density, the different amount of layers of flakes. How strong it reflects back, flip-flop color, which is a facing angle color, light facing color, which is a different color based on where the light hits the surface. And the only thing which we did not brush up on is the normal map. And what I always like to do, just to get more realism out of the shaders, is to actually add a normal map, a bump map into the code. Because real cars always have some kind of amount of bumpiness to them, especially to the car paint, because the metal job, the body of the car is and it's not perfect like it is in a CG world. So it's always great to break it up. And I keep repeating myself to always try to break up your shaders. And this is something we will be doing now. So if I just create a noise like this, and I create a bump node as well, AI bump to D, and I'm connecting the red color to the bump map, and the out value goes to my normal camera. Actually, it does not go to normal, it goes to the code normal, which is right there. So out value goes to code normal. And if I visualize, isolate selected my noise, you can see it's a bit too small. It needs to be a very broad bump. So let's just scale it down by maybe 0.1. And I think even that might be too big. So let's go maybe 0.02, 0.02, 0.02. And I think this should work. And if we bring back a bit more layers of detail, you can see there's some modulation going on. And I think this might be more than enough. So let's see what this brings us if I play up the bump amount. So maybe let's just go maybe 10%. It's hard to see if it's actually doing anything. So maybe we just bring back the scale up to 0.05. And let's see what we get now. So I'm just saving this image in my snapshot folder. Once it resolves, save this image. And let's just disable the bump height completely and see if there's a big difference. If not, we need to bring up the bump a bit more. So it should be a very subtle effect. And there you can see something is going on, but it's maybe a bit too subtle. So let's go maybe 0.5 in the bump and see what we get now. If there's still no strong representation of this, we can play around with the frequency. So this is now what we get, and this is how it was before. And you can see now that these lines here are not straight anymore. You can see there's some movement to them, and before it was super straight. And this is exactly what we were going for, just some breakup, and this is looking very cool now. Definitely bumpiness. It might be on 0.5 a bit too strong, especially in movement, so let's just go maybe to 3.5, and this should be done. We should be done with that. And another thing which we can try to do is add a scratch mat to this, just to get a more interesting code, because every code has some usage to it, especially objects which you are using daily, especially smartphones which have some metal sheen or something. You can always see there's lots of scratches going on. So let's see if we can set this up. Okay, so I just found a little scratch mat texture online, so it's nothing too special. I will show you in a bit. So what it looks like, it's very high dense scratches. So let's just load this in and just for now connect it right up to the shading engine and see what we get. So on default, this is our scratch mat, and I think it's way too big, so the scale is totally off. So what we will be doing now is I'm just going to the image node and I'm just scaling this up. So if I go to a scale of 2, we should get more scratches. So let's try maybe something like 10 and 10. Let's just go mipmap -8. So this is the highest mipmap. We can also try to actually not filter closest maybe. So this is really hard edge now. So you can slightly see these scratches, and this might just work. So let's see what we get by connecting this to the shader. All right, let's try and plug this into a regular bump map and see what we get. So the red channel goes to a typical bump map, and the out value goes to, again, to the code normal. And currently this will replace the previous one we had. So now we have the bump map connected, and let's just render this part here. Currently we don't see anything at all, so let's just boost up the height maybe to 0.5 and see if we can get some scratches visible. We can definitely see something. Let's just maybe go on the top here and see if it's better visible here. And if that is not the case, let's just do a few more adjustments. So the first thing which we need to do is go back to the image node and change the filter to be smart bicubic as it is on default. And then we can already see that we are getting some breakup on the code, which is exactly what we are going for. So in the highlight, you can see there's definitely some change. And if I switch back to the old render, you can see all the breakup happening and the speck on the top here and this bigger area, definitely some breakup there. So if this is too much, we can just dial down the bump height. And this is obviously different to what map you are using. Ideally, this should be used in a, with a normal map instead of a bump, because a normal map has another dimension to it, which gives a bit more detail. But all in all, this should work also good enough. And you can see we definitely get these scratches everywhere. I think the bump is still too strong. So let's just bring this back to down to maybe 0.1 and see what we get now. Okay, you can see there's some minor scratches. I'm not sure if the recording quality is good enough, but it's up to what you are working on, what your renders look like. You need to adjust it to your needs. But I think for the case of this render, this is totally fine. And we can see there's definitely some scratching going on, and these highlights, I think it looks pretty cool. So let's just render for final render settings and see what we get. Alright, now you can see after the render finished, you can definitely see that we get some very nice detail in the code paint, and there's definitely some scratching going on. We get lots of irregularities in the surface, and overall it just looks a lot better and a lot more realistic. So to cover the most important things which we did is, for metallic car paint, you should have a base diffuse, which is affecting the overall base color transmission. And then you would introduce some specularity just to get some metallic feel to the whole thing. And then for metallic flakes, you would introduce a density, which is making it visible. Then you play around with the scale of the flakes, play around with the normal randomize to display the strength of the flakes. And then you can colorize them. If both are on white, it's just a white, like a chrome flakes. And then you can definitely use a flip-flop to get some facing angle colors to it. With these settings, this is what you get. So we also introduced a bump map and a like a scratched surface map on top. So if you check the AOVs which I output, in a later lecture I will show you how to set these things up. You can definitely see in the code that we have serious scratches going on, and they are plussed on top. So this is a pass which you can control later in comp. And if you check the specular, this is our base metallic, and then the code is plussed on top to give us the final render of this. So I hope this showed you how to set up realistic car paint and be more familiar with this complex and advanced car paint shader shipped with Arnold. Thank you guys for watching this lecture, and I see you in the next one where we'll be talking about skin shading.